Known to some as Lee, Lenore was born in October 1933 in St. Albans, which is in Queens, New York, on the western end of Long Island. Left to right is Lenore's grandmother, Aileen, her mother, Eleanor, her sister, Esther, with Skippy, their dog, Lenore's grandfather, Carl, and Eleanor's brother, Rudy. Lenore's grandparents migrated to the United States through Ellis Island from Sweden. On the right is her marriage license in Swedish. The earliest photo I have was taken in 1923. I'm not positive, but I think that is Eleanor on the left, Lenore's mother. Eleanor met her future husband, Leonard Frank, in about 1927. Len got his pilot's license and took Ellie to Niagara Falls in 1927, but his piloting days were short-lived as he decided early on that flying was too dangerous, so he gave it up and took up boating instead. That's Ellie and Len on Old Orchard Beach on the left, and Len's father, also named Leonard, on the right in 1928. Len and Ellie were always visiting with friends and traveling, here in 1929 and 1932. In the left photo, that's Lenore's parents on the right side, and Len's father, Leonard, on the left, on a trip to Canada in 1928. As you can see, the Franks have fishing in their genes. Lenore's paternal grandparents migrated to the United States from Waterdingen, Germany, which is up in the north, near Lake Constance and the border with Switzerland. Len and Ellie were married in 1929. Here we have portraits of Eleanor and Leonard, though I'm not sure what year they were taken. Although Len had only a sixth grade education, he and his stepbrother Walter were hard workers and went into business as partners. And together they built more than 8,000 homes, the Columbia Presbyterian Nursing Home, and the Mid-Island Shopping Plaza in Hicksville, New York, which was one of the first shopping malls in the country. Len was president of the National Association of Home Builders and the housing advisor to President Eisenhower. And that's Len and Ellie on a trip to Washington, D.C. On the right is Ellie with her sister Esther. Lenore adored Esther, who always loved to play hopscotch and all kinds of other games with Lenore. As children, Lenore and her best friend, Mildred Luckett, loved to take the bus into New York City and go swimming at the infamous saltwater swimming pool inside the Hotel St. George in Brooklyn. This is back in the day when you could send a couple of 9-year-old girls off alone on the bus into New York City with a couple of nickels in their pocket and not have to worry about them. Lenore and Millie also often used to take the bus into Manhattan to Radio City Music Hall to see the Rockettes. Both girls wanted to be Rockettes when they grew up. And here they are, practicing to be Rockettes. Lenore is the taller of the two girls in this old home movie. And here is another old home movie of Lenore, soon to be joined by her brother Franklin at Easter time. Having come from Germany, Lenore's great-grandfather traveled far and wide through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and all the way up to Canada, looking for the place that most reminded him of his home in Germany. He found that special place in Haddam, Connecticut, where he purchased this farm. He is buried under the old oak tree along the driveway. Each summer, the entire family would go to the farm to escape the heat of New York City and also to avoid the threat of polio. They had a huge vegetable garden and a pond to fish and play in. Here you see family and friends swimming in and playing on the pond on the farm. They even had rowboats. It was a shallow pond, only about waist deep. This is the family having fun jumping into a big pile of leaves, with Lenore really piling it on, and then her father Len jumping into the mix too. Lenore and Franklin are growing up, and here they are on a boat trip on the East River with Manhattan in the background. They had just returned from a trip up the Hudson River. Meanwhile, up in Winnipeg, Canada, Harold Hardy was born 3 months premature in 1920 and miraculously survived. Hal had a baby sister, but she had died, so Hal was an only child. Hal's father was English, of the Hardy fly fishing rod clan in London. His mother was French and Irish, and her family had come to Canada in 1546 from St. Malo, France, which is the photo on the right, when 3 brothers, who were soldiers, arrived to supplement the soldiers of Jacques Cartier, the founder of what is now known as Quebec, in 1534. Dave and I have numerous French-Canadian relatives, and Hal and Lenore had visited with many of them. Hal's parents had understandably grown weary of the frigid and snowy Canadian winters and decided to move to the United States, to California, the Golden State. In 1924, when Harold was 4 years old, his parents packed him, along with his grandmother and Uncle Charlie, up and moved to California, driving along the Lincoln Highway. These are photos I found in the National Archives of the Lincoln Highway in California and up in the Sierra Nevada mountains up near Donner Pass. Hal's father worked as a cable car driver in San Francisco. Hal was orphaned at a young age. One day at work, Hal's father heroically stopped a horse-drawn carriage pulled by runaway horses just before they trampled a young girl. Hal's father died shortly after that incident. Hal's mother, in the left photo, died only 6 months after his father. Hal always said that his mother had died from a broken heart. Lucky for Hal, he still had his grandmother and Uncle Charlie, who raised him. Here's a portrait and photo of Hal when he was a little older in 1941 on the right, so 21 years old. Hal was naturalized as a U.S. citizen in the 1940s, and during the Cold War, in 1956, he worked as a civilian in the U.S. Navy on Inuiatak and Bikini Islands in the Marshall Island chain in the South Pacific on Operation Red Wing. In the left photo is the ship that Hal was stationed on, and the right photo shows one of the barracks they stayed in while they were working on the island. Operation Red Wing was a series of 17 nuclear test detonations from May to July 1956 that were conducted at Bikini and Inuiatak atolls. This is a National Archives photo, but Hal was likely on one of the ships you see surrounding this detonation. Hal told us that everyone on the ship was given a pair of thick glasses to wear to watch the blast, because it was so bright and would have damaged their eyes. Many years later, in the 1980s, Hal received a letter from the Nuclear Defense Agency offering him a considerable payment as compensation for his exposure to such high levels of radioactivity, which they didn't fully understand the consequences of back during the testing. Hal turned down the payment and said the government didn't owe him anything at all, and that he was proud to do his part to help his country. That's the kind of guy Harold was. Meanwhile, Lenore graduated with a secretarial degree from Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri, but decided she really wanted to be a nurse, so she enrolled at Columbia University School of Nursing in New York City. The photo on the left was taken in 1954 during her capping ceremony, which is the initiation into the field of nursing when students begin their practical, hands-on training. I snagged her 1956 graduation photo from a class reunion publication. The graduation photo on the left was kindly sent to me by Lenore's good friend Nancy Houseworth, and it was taken in June 1956. Nancy is on the left in the back, and Betty Forsberg is next to Nancy, and Lenore is on the right side of the back row. You will see more photos of the three of them together coming up. In the photo on the right, Lenore is on the left and was a bridesmaid in Nancy's wedding the next year in June 1957. Here's a couple more photos of Nancy's bridal party. Lenore is on the left in the left photo, and of course that's her in the center in the right photo. Yearning for adventure after graduation, Lenore traveled to Haiti with a friend. Next, she and her friend Nancy Hayden from Stevens College drove to San Francisco together. When they arrived, they were flat broke, so they found jobs and took a room at the YMCA, later renting an apartment together after they had saved enough money. Lenore worked as a nurse for an eye doctor. One evening in 1958, Lenore and Nancy were invited to a meeting of the Oakland Ski Club, where they met Harold Hardy, who was president of the ski club. Harold escorted the girls home that evening. Lenore invited Harold in for coffee, and they were married 6 months later. These photos were taken in Sausalito. Lenore and Harold were married on Thanksgiving Day in 1958 at her parents' home in Roslyn Harbor, back on Long Island. On the left are Lenore's maternal grandparents, Carl and Aileen Kritzberg, and on the right is who we always called Grandma Frank, who was the third paternal grandmother, as the two previous ones had passed away. The happy couple moved back to San Francisco and lived in an apartment in Haight-Ashbury, right before it became famous for being Haight-Ashbury. Here they are at an Oakland Ski Club party. I'm not sure where this photo was taken, but I like to think it was taken in Chinatown in San Francisco, which Harold spent a lot of time in. When Lenore became pregnant in 1959, she and Hal moved back to the East Coast, to West Islip on Long Island, because Lenore wanted her children to grow up around her family and with cousins. David was born in West Islip in 1960 and Ellen in 1962. Both of these photos were taken at their home in West Islip. Here's a couple of portraits of Dave and me, taken when we were young. In 1962, we moved to the model home in a new housing development that Lenore's father, Len, had built in Hauppauge. Visiting on the right is Dottie Hedigian, a California friend. Lenore loved to cook and entertain company, and she was always inviting family and friends over for Sunday dinners and for holidays. She enjoyed using her china, crystal, and silverware sets and keeping everything polished up for the next occasion. She was always setting a lovely table, and she very much enjoyed hosting dinner parties filled with family and friends. This is a family gathering on the right, not long after we moved to Berkshire Drive. After Dave and I were born, we got to spend time with our grandparents, Len and Ellie, on their boats. We had a portrait of Leonard hanging in our home. I'm not sure just when these portraits were taken. I'd guess about 1968 or so. We took a number of family trips. I think that was Pioneer Village on the left, and the Everglades in Florida on the right. Lenore loved her holidays, and she liked to dress us up, me in my Easter bonnet, and go to our grandparents' home in Roslyn for Easter dinner with our extended family. In 1971, we got a dachshund that Lenore named Cinnamon. Cinnamon had puppies, and we kept one of them and named her Coco. That's Dave with them in 1973. There was always a party to look forward to with our Berkshire Drive neighbors, such as this Hawaiian luau with the whole gang. There's Hal's precious 1973 Corolla wagon on the left, though the photo was taken at a later date. I wish I had a photo of his old Chevy truck, which we used to call the malt shop. Back to the Berkshire Drive parties. Each year, just after Thanksgiving, Lenore would start brewing glug for their annual Christmas party in a giant flower pot in the basement. The next photos are from the 1973 party. The Christmas parties involved lots of food, including hors d'oeuvres, a sit-down dinner, and lots of glug, and Christmas caroling, despite the weather. Our family took the proverbial trip to Walt Disney World in 1973, not long after it opened, when I was 11 and Dave 13. Lenore's parents, Len and Ellie, had purchased an oceanfront condo at a small 6-unit complex called The Ridge in Highland Beach, Florida. Each year, as far back as I can remember, Lenore's parents would come and stay overnight with us on Christmas Eve. My grandfather loved to cook, and he was always helping my mom out in the kitchen with every meal. This is the 1975 Berkshire Drive Christmas party. I was hoping some photos of other parties would turn up, but no luck. Each summer started with the Memorial Day pool cover cleaning party, when Mr. O'Flaherty would remove his pool cover and put it on the hill in the Burroughs yard, and all the kids were given a big sponge, and many buckets of soapy water were involved, and we would run and jump and slide down the pool cover, cleaning it. We also had block parties with pony rides, 4th of July pool parties, softball games, Labor Day parties at the Lions House with charades after dark, and Friday night poker games. We even had go-kart races with homemade push carts, which we raced down the hill on Berkshire Drive, and everybody decorated theirs with their own house number. That's the 1975 party again on the left, and there's Hal and Lenore on the right, all ready for the 1975 New Year's Eve party. There's Co-Captain Eleanor aboard the Len L, which they named as a combination of their names, Len and Ellie. There is a trend in first names in our family. Eleanor's mother was named Elin, spelled E-L-I-N, which is the Swedish version of my name, Ellen. They named my grandmother Eleanor. Curiously, Ellie married a man by the name of Leonard, Len for short. They named my mom Lenore, who then went full circle and named me Ellen, the anglicized version of my great-grandmother's name, Aylin. Len and Ellie were active members of the Freeport Yacht Club on the left, where they docked their boat. Len served as Commodore for the Freeport Yacht Club. When they purchased their place in Highland Beach, Florida, they quickly found and became members of the Hillsborough Beach Yacht Club on the right. Hal played our piano nearly every day and also his Martin guitar. He was always whistling and singing songs. When our family moved to Connecticut in 1976, our Berkshire Drive neighbors threw a big surprise party. There's Mr. and Mrs. Zog, who lived next door to us. There's Mr. Woy and the Lions and Mr. Suford and Mr. Maxey in the back, and Harold being his usual silly self. Lenore and Hal received lots of silly going-away presents. There's Connie Navarro looking on in the photo on the right. The Navarros live directly across the street from us. Lenore still had this clock hanging in her apartment in Essex Meadows, and the handmade wooden plaque with its hand-drawn map of our neighbors' homes hung in our hallway. There's Cinnamon on the left and Coco on the right, the first year we lived in Madison. Cinnamon and Coco were both always underfoot. It took a couple of years to build our new home in Madison, and we moved into it in 1978. Dave graduated from high school in 1978, and we continued boating excursions with Len and Ellie as often as we could. Each year, our grandparents continued their Christmas Eve sleepover tradition with us. Ellie and Len loved to play games, and Yahtzee was always a favorite. and that is Len opening a new game of triple Yahtzee. Trouble and Battleship were Hal's favorite games, and Scrabble was Lenore's favorite game. Dave has always been into cars and motorcycles. That's him in our driveway in Madison. Lenore held a big birthday party for Hal when he turned 60 in October of 1980. I was a sophomore in college then at the University of Delaware, and I drove up with a couple of college friends to help him celebrate. Many Berkshire Drive friends drove up to Connecticut for the party. That's Mr. Seufert in the back on the left. And Hal mimicking Robin, the professional belly dancer, who is a friend from Guilford. Lenore and Hal hosted a family 4th of July party in 1981. So we had lots of company in our new home. It was a lot of fun to have multiple generations of our extended family gathered together at the same time. During that visit, Lenore took Grandma Frank and the Stonebreakers to Deep River, which is near Haddam, to visit with cousins there. After Grandma Frank's husband had passed away, she lived in a home across the pond from the old farmhouse. On the right is Lenore's youngest brother, Charlie, with his wife, Chris, along with Eleanor and their children. Lenore loved to spend time in New York City, and each year she attended her Columbia University School of Nursing class reunion. There she is with Nancy Houseworth and Betty Forsberg again at their 1981 reunion. Here's Cinnamon doing what she did best, begging for cheese doodles from Hal. The two of them ate a lot of cheese doodles together. We always had 2 Christmas trees, one in the family room and this one in the living room. On the right, Lenore is at the Ridge in 1981, the year her father passed away. The sundial in these 2 photos was gifted to Ellie by the residents of the Ridge in remembrance of her husband, Len. There's Harold riding a cable car in San Francisco. You'll remember that his father used to be a cable car driver there. On the right, they are in Sausalito again, this time in 1982. Hal liked to tell people that he grew up under the Golden Gate Bridge. On the right, they are at the Japanese Tea Garden in Golden Gate Park. Lenore was active with the American Association of University Women, AAUW for short, and served as branch president. She and Harold were also active with the Gourmet Club and Book Group, and they made many wonderful friends through these associations. Marjorie Johnson kindly sent me the photo of them on the left, taken at her home in Madison. On the right is Lenore in Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which she and I visited on our way to Florida to close up Aunt Esther's home when Lenore moved her to Connecticut to live near us. Here is Betty, Nancy, and Lenore at their 1984 class reunion, and Lenore with Dorothy Stonebreaker on the right side, probably on a cruise somewhere. Here is Eleanor outside of their home in Roslyn, where they lived in the chauffeur's quarters of the Percy Pine estate. I always loved that house, and the giant turntable for cars inside its enormous garage. And there's Eleanor on a carousel horse in 1985. Also in 1985, Lenore and Hal came to visit me at Grand Canyon National Park. They hiked about a mile down into the canyon with me on the South Kaibab Trail. Christmas 1985, when Lenore, Hal, and Dave spent Christmas at Franklin's home in Bayville, on the north shore of Long Island. Lenore and Hal attended many weddings over the years. On the left is Teresa Ossenfort's wedding in 1986, and on the right, Maureen Ossenfort's wedding in 1987, both in Virginia. I'm not sure what my family was all dressed up for in the photo on the left, but it may have been for Karen Frank's wedding on Long Island in 1986. Lenore's 1986 class reunion. Lenore continued taking nursing seminars to keep up her credentials as a registered nurse. Lenore had worked as an RN at Good Samaritan Hospital in West Islip, and she had also been an administrator at a nursing home in St. James. After we moved to Connecticut, she became a travel agent. Lenore's brother Franklin liked to host theme parties, and he hosted a Dickens party for Christmas 1986. There's Harold and Lenore with my cousin Glenn. As the years went by, the landscaping at Lenore and Hal's home in Madison flourished, and spring and fall were always especially pretty. A family gathering on the left, and Harold reading the newspaper on a train in Switzerland on the right. In 1987, Lenore and Hal visited Lenore's brother Charlie and his wife Chris at their home along the James River in Newport News, Virginia. There's Chris in the photo on the left. In 1988, Lenore and Hal took a cruise to Alaska. When I was working at Lake Clark National Park, I was able to fly to Anchorage and spend the weekend with them. Of course, I had to be photographed underneath the sign for Port Hardy on the northern tip of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. Christmas 1988, with Dave and me on the left, and Dave with two of his best buddies, Brian and Bill, on the right. Lenore and Hal came to visit me in southern Utah in 1989. That is Cedar Breaks National Monument in the photo on the right. Christmas 1989 and Franklin's Nutcracker Party. Lenore and Harold dressed as court jesters. I had just gotten off the plane and didn't have a costume, so my mom handed me a flannel nightgown and told me I would be Clara. That's me with my grandmother, and my cousin Kenny with his wife Anita, and Linda with her husband Peter. Still 1989, and that's me with my friends Kari and Elizabeth on the left, and of course Hal and Lenore on the right. Hal loved to take people for rides in his 1932 Chevy. Hal and Lenore hosted a 1920s party. That's them on the left, and a motley crew of fun-loving characters on the right. I can't even look at these photos without laughing. And that's Hal and Lenore dancing on the right. The photos of this party just crack me up. Everyone just had way too much fun. Lenore may have wanted to be a rockette when she was young, but she seems to have ended up as a can-can girl instead. That's her in the center on the right. Lenore and Hal came to visit me in 1990 when I was working at Bryce Canyon National Park. I took in a couple of puppies that came to me with parvovirus, and I was able to successfully nurse both of them back to health. The puppy on the right eventually went to a friend, and I kept the black and white one and named her Cirronimbus because of her cloud coloring. There's Lenore on a train in the Swiss Alps in 1990. And Hal having fun, as usual. Here's the Berkshire Drive gang gathered together on Lenore and Hal's gazebo deck. Christmas 1990 in Florida. Lenore and Hal had purchased their own unit at the Ridge in the 1980s, in the same small complex where Ellie had her unit. Lenore and Hal on a cruise with the Stonebreakers. They traveled together often. Family photos at Dave and Erin's wedding in 1991. That same year, Bill Castelli and Kari Nelson married, and they lived right next door to Harold and Lenore for many years before eventually purchasing their own home in Clinton. Christmas 1991 with Eleanor, Hal, Lenore, and me in Madison. More Christmas 1991 photos of family and friends, including Kari and Bill and Dave and Erin on the right. Hal planted evergreen trees in our backyard, and each year he would cut one for our Christmas tree, and each year he would plant another evergreen for a future Christmas. Lenore and Hal visiting Bill Black from their Oakland Ski Club days on Donner Lake in the Sierras in 1992. Charlie and Chris and their children in 1992. Lenore and Hal visited me that same year at my new home in Salt Lake City. And you're about to see Lenore mashing potatoes for Thanksgiving dinner in Highland Beach in 1993. Hal really, really loved Lenore's mashed potatoes. Here she is.
There she is, and there's the turkey. There's the turkey all covered up. And there's the working table. And there's the mashed potatoes. And there's Lenore again.
Eleanor at the Ridge, and many thanks to Sharon Downing for sharing this photo of Eleanor on the right doing jello shots with the guys. Eleanor was always game for anything. The occasion was Brian's birthday. That's Dave lighting Brian's birthday candles with Lenore in the back and of course Hal on the right. Lenore and Hal celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a family trip to Bermuda in 1993. There's Lenore and Hal with Dave and Aaron, and of course Eleanor came along. There she is with the hibiscus flowers. My friend Jennifer from college has cousins in Bermuda that she happened to be visiting, so she and I were able to overlap our visits there. Harold in a British phone booth, and Lenore standing next to a giant flagpole in Bermuda. Mopeds are the way to get around in Bermuda. And on the right, there's Lenore with the stained glass panel that you may have seen hanging upstairs in Highland Beach. Harold enjoyed woodworking and was always making crafty decorations, such as this Santa sled pulled by cows in 1994. On the right is Lenore with Chris and Charlie. A big welcome to Kyle Hardy on April 11, 1994. Lenore and Hal were happy to live only a few towns away from their new grandson. Hal and Lenore on the Mystic Whaler. On the right, it looks like they may be in California again, or who knows where. Kyle must have been impatient for Christmas to come, as he took it upon himself to go out and get the family Christmas tree himself. As all kids do, Kyle grew up quickly. Lenore with some of her friends in about 1995, and Hal and Lenore at a fancy dinner dance. They love to dance. Christmas 1995. Eleanor continued to spend Christmas with us for as many years as she could. Kyle learning how to swim with his dad in Madison in 1996. Lenore with her 4th of July dessert in 1997, celebrating with Dave, Kyle, and Hal in Madison. Lenore with her Thanksgiving turkey in 1997 in Florida. That's Eleanor's friend Alma sitting next to her. On the right, she is with Eleanor and Chris. Summer fun in Madison in 1998, and an incriminating photo of Kyle with his grandmother. Eleanor with her 90th birthday bouquet and celebrating her birthday on the deck with Lenore in 1998. Eleanor's 90th birthday celebration again on the left, and Charlie and Chris with Eleanor on the right. Harold and Lenore enjoying a lobster dinner with Dorothy and Jim Stonebreaker in 1998. Kyle, Aaron, and Dave in 1999 on the left, and Hal, Franklin, Ruth, and Eleanor on the right in 2000. On the left is the last photo I have of Hal in 2000, not long before he passed away in June that year. On the right is Lenore in Madison in August when we were preparing for Harold's celebration of life. Here's Kyle in 2001 with both of his grandmothers on the left, Lenore and Larry, and on the right is Eleanor in 2002. Lenore playing Indiana Jones at Stony Creek in 2002, and on the right with her two brothers, Franklin and Charlie. Lenore in Idaho on our way to Sun Valley in 2003, and in the hammock on my front porch in Salt Lake City. Lenore helped me with one of my foster puppies, Zoe, over Thanksgiving 2003. On the right is Lenore with the Stacklers and Stonebreakers. Kyle is nearly as tall as his Christmas tree in 2003. And on the right is Kyle and Dave with his new wife Kim, and Kate and Allie. Lenore in Canada in 2003, and Nancy Houseworth visiting Lenore in Florida in 2004. Lenore, Franklin, and Charlie lost their mom Eleanor in 2004 and scattered her ashes in the Gulf Stream off of Highland Beach from Franklin's boat, so she could be reunited with Len, whose ashes had been scattered in northern waters many years before. In the photo on the right, just to the left of Franklin's head, you can see how the tiny ridge complex is dwarfed by the newer condominiums that were built around it in the years after Len and Ellie had first purchased their unit there many years before. In the summer of 2004, Lenore and I went wolf watching in Yellowstone National Park. We returned through Grand Teton National Park and spent some time at Jenny Lake, one of Lenore's favorite places. Lenore on the left with some Madison friends, including the McAvoys, and on the right with the Stonebreakers in 2005. 2004 brought another Berkshire Drive reunion, this time in Florida. Russ and Rita Callahan, on the right, are a large part of the reason why Lenore and Hal had chosen to relocate to Madison to live near their good friends. Lenore loved to tell her 2005 story about her frog, which she didn't notice was in the toilet bowl until she was ready to flush. She bravely rescued the little frog, and there it is, safe again, outside where it belonged. Hurricane Wilma paid a visit to Highland Beach in 2005, tearing off a good chunk of Lenore's roof and causing considerable damage to her unit. You have to admire her attitude. After assessing the damage and salvaging what she could, she shut the door, declared it was somebody else's problem, and went away for 4 months on a world cruise. When she returned, the insurance company and contractors had finished their repairs, and she was able to settle in again. By 2007, Kyle was already nearly as tall as his dad. In 2008, I moved from Salt Lake City to Homestead, Florida. Lenore drove with me, and along the way, we stopped at Arches National Park and at Canyon du Chelly on the Navajo Indian Reservation in Arizona. A cruise ship was Lenore's preferred method of travel. This is the Seven Seas Mariner, docked in some exotic port somewhere in 2008. Also in 2008, here is Lenore in a couple of different places, possibly in Italy, I'm not sure just where. And here she is in another port on that same cruise in 2008. Lenore and I continued our road trips after I moved to Florida. Here she is in Key West in 2009 at the Tropical Gardens at West Martello Tower. There's Kyle all dressed up to go to work at the local Big Y grocery store as a customer service agent in 2010. And that same year, she visited with Betty and Jack Forsberg. On the left, Lenore visited with Russ and Rita Callahan again in 2010. On the right, that same year, Lenore and her best friend Millie, who you will remember from Rockettes' fame and fortune, spent a week together relaxing at a spa in Fort Lauderdale. Lenore and Millie were born only 9 days apart and lived just down the street from each other. They have been best friends for their entire lives. Even after moving away from each other, they always stayed in touch and visited each other often over the years. Another class reunion photo in about 2010. There is Columbia University Hospital on the right. Lenore on the left in her beloved New York City, which she always Very much enjoyed visiting, especially with good friends to spend time with. Lenore continued cooking holiday dinners over the years, here in 2010. And on the right, Kyle continued growing taller and taller. Lenore frequently joined her Roslyn high school friends that were living in Florida for lunch. Her Columbia University class reunion that same year illustrates just how much nursing uniforms have changed since 1956. 2011 brought another gathering of Lenore's Hauppauge friends. On the left is Clara Burrows, and on the right, facing us, is Ellie Lyons and Bill O'Flaherty. Family photos of Lenore, Dave, Kim, and Kyle, taken in 2011. I snagged this group photo of Lenore and her friends from the website of the Connecticut Shoreline branch of the American Association of University Women. In 2012, Lenore and her Roslyn High School friends gathered for a sleepover party in Orlando. They lounged around in their pajamas a lot, relaxed, shared memories, and had a lot of fun together. Here's a couple more photos of the Roslyn High School sleepover party in Orlando. Lenore always tried to eat healthy, exercised every morning, and enjoyed a daily glass or two of red wine. Lenore photographed at Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia in 2013 and in front of my hibiscus in Homestead, Florida on Easter Sunday. Even after she was no longer comfortable swimming in the ocean, Lenore still loved to put her feet in the water. And there she is with her Christmas roast in 2013. In 2014, I snapped this photo of the home in Haddam that Grandma Frank had lived in the 1940s, across the pond from the big farmhouse, after her husband passed away. And there's Chris and Charlie in front of the ridge with the coconut. Brian and Sharon in front of their home in Brantford in 2015, and their infamous turtle, Thomas. Brian found Thomas as a tiny baby many years ago in an airport, scooped him up into a coffee cup, and took him home with him. This was back when you could still do such things. Thomas has got to be the most spoiled turtle in the entire world. He watches TV with Brian and Sharon, and they feed him lobster on a stick. Brian, Dave, Lenore, and Kyle enjoying Brian and Sharon's backyard. And on the right, also in 2015, Kyle's graduation from Emmanuel College in Boston. And a couple of nice photos of Kyle with his grandmother, probably taken in Boston. Lenore visited with her Hauppauge friends again in 2015. There she is with Rita Callahan and Clara Burrows. On her 2015 cruise, Lenore became good friends with Lolly Harper from South Carolina, and even during the pandemic, the two of them were always planning future cruises together. On the right is Lenore dipping her feet into the Atlantic Ocean in Highland Beach again. Lenore on the left lunching with her Roslyn High School friends in 2015, and Lenore on the right showing the scale of beach erosion after a passing tropical storm. If you remember back to the photo of Lenore helping me with my foster puppy Zoe in 2003, this is Zoe all grown up and visiting me in Golden, Colorado, where I moved in 2015. Zoe was adopted by a couple driving past my home on their way back to California from Salt Lake City. It's a long and fun story, but they ended up tracking me down and returning to Salt Lake City to adopt Zoe. And Carol and I have been friends ever since that day. On the left is one of our family favorite trees in Highland Beach, dubbed way back when by Eleanor as the tree within a tree. And on the right is Lenore's niece, Linda, with her two boys, JP and Mike, who is holding JP's new puppy, Ellie, in 2017. Mike on the left holding Ellie, and JP on the right, both in 2017. Ellie must be nearly as big as one of JP's horses by now. In 2018, Lenore's good friends Mariana, Nico, and Bianca got a new Eskimo puppy. And on the left is Bianca holding Cooper. That same year, Lenore and I visited the Murakami Japanese Gardens in Delray Beach. Colin and Marissa Frank's wedding in New York City in 2018, and a group photo of Kenny, Lenore, Charlie, and Linda at their wedding. A group family photo of the whole gang at Karen and Marissa Frank's wedding in New York. Anna and Karen Reuter with Lenore at the wedding, and on the right is Linda, Kenny's wife Anita, Lenore, and Glenn. On the left are Charlie, Chris, and Lenore having fun at the wedding, and Charlie and Lenore on the right. Glenn and his wife Stephanie at the wedding, and Lenore with a view of her precious New York City skyline behind her. Lenore and I took a river cruise down the Snake and Columbia Rivers in 2018 from Clarkston, Idaho to Astoria, Oregon, and back up to Portland. Each day we wore each other out, and one of our new friends on that trip snapped this photo of us both snoozing during an evening lecture. As they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree. Lenore at Multnomah Falls in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon. On the right is a fun photo of Lenore's best friend Millie, staged by her daughter Sandra, in the center. On our 2019 road trip, Lenore and I stopped at LL Bean in Freeport, Maine, where I had my photo taken in front of the giant hiking boot. And there is Lenore at the Bubbles in Acadia National Park. Lenore ate lobster at every meal she could on that trip, including in her breakfast omelet, and of course in a traditional lobster bake dinner. In New Hampshire, we rode the famous Cog Railroad to the top of Mount Washington, famous for having the worst weather in the world. Lenore's favorite restaurant in Florida was Ellie's 50s Diner in Delray Beach. All the waitresses there knew her by name. In 2019, Lenore sailed aboard the Crystal Serenity and had to find her own way home from Australia when the pandemic struck and all the ports closed down. She became good friends with Sienna and Nunzio, a lovely couple from England and Italy. Here's Kyle all duded up for the pandemic in 2020, and on the right with his husky, Sweetie. Here's a couple of family photos taken at Kim and Dave's home in Old Lyme in 2020. Lenore was close with many of Dave's high school friends, including Mark Becker on the left, and through Mark she became friends with Mark's mother, Cecily. In the spring of 2021, Lenore decided it was time to sell her beloved oceanfront condo in Highland Beach. She treasured her last days there, visiting with as much family and friends as she could. There is her nephew Glenn on the left, and her brother Franklin is on the right side in both photos. Lenore's niece Linda was a huge help when Lenore was packing up and moving, and Linda also cheerfully ferried Lenore around to get her COVID-19 vaccines. Glenn is Linda's youngest brother and has visited many times over the years from his home in Boulder City, Nevada. You'll remember Bianca with her new Eskimo puppy Cooper from 2018, and here she is again in 2021 when she and her parents, Mariana and Nico, came to help Lenore pack up her car for her move to Connecticut. Mariana and Nico had been Lenore's next-door neighbors for many years and have always been a huge help to Lenore. We consider them family. Along the Connecticut shoreline, Lenore's favorite restaurant was Lenny and Joe's Fishtail in Westbrook, where her favorite menu items were lobster bisque, clam chowder, fresh seasonal swordfish, and of course, lobster. I am so grateful that I was able to visit my mom one last time last summer, and that we braved a few restaurants together during the pandemic. On the right, we were checking out a new Mexican restaurant in Niantic. Here is one last set of family photos taken last summer at Dave and Kim's home in Old Lyme in August of 2021. And this is where we bid bon voyage and smooth sailing to our dear and precious Lenore on November 20th of 2021. We love you, Lenore. Vaya con Dios.